I'm glad you're with us, and I'm happy that Eli Bar-On, Lieutenant Colonel Eli Bar-On Wright, is here.
Not Lieutenant Colonel?
I'm not a lieutenant colonel in the army you were, right?
No, I'm a specialist in military technology and security doctrine.
Security doctrine. Okay, fine. We're going to, deal with things outside, and for the internal part we'll do more programs. Something happened that, in my opinion, is on the scale of James Bond or some of the fantastic events of World War II, like behind a ship and all sorts of gadgets like that. In short, I'll say what I know, and you can elaborate. The Ukrainians transported a large number of houses on trucks. Under the roofs of these houses, they hit aircraft, UAVs. Some of them made it as far as 4,000 kilometers from the border to Russian Air Force bases. Then, at the same time, with the push of a button from a great distance, the roofs open up and the UAVs come out and destroy a huge number of Russia's top fighter jets. Is that the story? What actually happened there? To me, that sounds almost unbelievable.
Well, there was a combination of several things there that are required for operations of this scale, like, for example, when we carried out a similar operation involving UAVs. It was a different operation, of course, but the fundamentals are the same. On one hand, you need exceptional intelligence that shows, up where the Russian planes are stored, how exactly they're stored at the bases, right down to the level of each individual aircraft. So the Ukrainians had that, and you can obtain it using satellites. Russian planes are big aircraft. You can't hide them underground. These aren't planes the size of an F-15 or a MiG-25. These are planes the size of a Boeing.
What?
These are planes, strategic bombers, at least the size of a Boeing 737, and sometimes even bigger.
It's huge.
It's huge. They're on the runways, but of course they're in well-protected and very remote bases, because otherwise the Ukrainians would have attacked them a long time ago. Now, the operation itself, the development is in the field of UAVs. The Ukrainians are the most advanced country in the world when it comes to UAVs, much more so than.
I read a statistic that this year they're producing 2.5 million UAVs. Next year, 4.5 million.
That's right. The UAVs are actually the means by which the Ukrainians are able to avoid losing the war against an empire like Russia, which has much more manpower and endless soldiers, equipment, and all those things. UAVs, in fact, are the weapon of the future that has become the present. UAVs, in my opinion, ultimately, and I don't want to get into this too much, but within 20 years, I think all manned fighter jets will be retired and moved to museums because they just won't be needed anymore. Now, what happened here is that they pulled off a kind of deception operation. They managed to smuggle the UAVs into Russia, and it's not that hard. The borders there are vast and long, so it's possible to do it. They succeeded. From what I understood, the truck drivers didn't even know they were carrying UAVs. They were transporting wooden houses, hauling trailers. Now, these trailers got very close to the bases, and the nice thing is that the UAVs there were small and stored away. These were actually drones, drones are aircraft, but these are like helicopters with 4 propellers, and they're very small. They're about 1 meter by 1 meter, no bigger. Then the roofs opened up and, a swarm, not just individual UAVs. A whole swarm headed toward the target.
How many is a swarm?
A swarm could be 20, 30.
Wow.
They headed toward the target. It's not just that they're heading toward the base, each one knows exactly which plane it's targeting, and it flies precisely according to the coordinates programmed into its electronic brain. They have electric motors, so you can barely hear them. If they're flying at night, you can't see them either. And they fly, and not only do they hit the plane, but they strike the critical spot of the plane. Let's say the cockpit, where the pilot sits, where all the instruments are, that's the brain, or the fuel tank if it's full, then you set it on fire. I've seen it myself here, with planes burning. And everything was carried out in coordination, and that's the big thing. Everything was carried out at the exact same second. Everything was done, yes, not only was the launch time calculated, but even the impact time was calculated, down to that level of precision. It was an exceptional execution. Of course, all the Ukrainian operators returned safely to their base. Maybe there were a few people inside the Soviet Union, but the Ukrainians announced that everyone made it back safely. And the Russians were stunned, completely shocked. I'm not sure they were the first to come up with this method. There were talks in the media, which I can't confirm or deny, but there were rumors that here and there we operated in Iran using similar methods, though not with such large numbers of UAVs and not on this scale. But every time, something would blow up over there.
I hear what you're saying, and I want to dig into this a bit. Some of the drivers had to travel a distance of 4,000 kilometers.
Either that, or some of them, or they switched drivers. And this happens in countries like that, both in the United States and in Russia. The driver gets to a certain destination and then someone else takes over.
Very nice. And then they have to go all the way back.
No, they're not Ukrainian drivers. They're Russian drivers. It was.
What did you say?
They're Russian drivers. They had no idea what was going on. Someone hired them. Which company hired them?
And told them to move a house?
This reminds me of the beeper operation. Yeah, someone hired them and they were told to move a house. How would they know what's inside that house?
Fantastic. Listen, this is beyond anything you could imagine. The scale, now let's learn something from this. You pointed out the swarm-like nature of this operation. A swarm rises up, quietly, no one sees, no one hears at night. It's like those drones we know, the ones kids play with or used to take pictures. Okay, just bigger. Does this change the future battlefield?
First of all, if we look at the last two wars, both the Russia-Ukraine war and the India-Pakistan war, we see that there, unlike what happens here, because here we're alone in the field, we don't have a Hezbollah Air Force or a Hamas Air Force, but there we see that the main manned air forces, the big ones, with pilots, with ground crews, with bases, basically aren't functioning. The Russian Air Force is considered the second largest air force in the world after the American Air Force.
What do you mean by not functioning?
It doesn't participate in the war. Why doesn't it participate in the war? Because the planes are shot down easily. The planes aren't effective. It's very easy to hit them. And now the Chinese, I even wrote an article about this, the Chinese have developed missiles, the Americans too, but the Chinese have developed missiles that can shoot down planes from a range of hundreds of kilometers, and that's what happened. The Indian Air Force charged into the war with Pakistan, sending an armada to bomb Pakistan with some of the world's best planes, the French Rafale jets. The pride of French engineering. Possibly the most advanced fighter jets Europe has, and they were shot down with missiles called PL-15s from a range of 100.
You mean the Pakistanis?
The Pakistanis. With the Chinese plane that launched a missile from a range of 184 kilometers. There has never been an air-to-air battle at a range of 184 kilometers. Usually, air-to-air is at 20 or 30 kilometers. And they shot it down, which basically neutralized the Indian Air Force. They shot it down inside Indian territory. The Ukrainians did the same thing to the Russians, and the Russian Air Force is basically not active. What is active in these wars, one of which has ended for now and one is still ongoing, are the UAVs. They are actually the most effective and efficient strike tool, as long as you have them in large quantities and operate them smartly. Now, both the Russians and the Ukrainians are using dozens, even hundreds, of UAVs against each other every day.
In swarms.
Some in swarms, some individually. It depends. You have UAVs for the individual soldier, which are small, weighing 3 or 4 kilos, and they can spot a target from a range of 100 or 200 kilometers and take it out. And then you have the heavier UAVs, which are operated by the battalion support companies, and those have a range of 100 kilometers. Even in World War II, they were still thinking about cavalry units. Those were cavalry units. They fought, like this, and it took, like the evening before the historian. Are we in the same situation? We're not in the same situation, because we woke up. We woke up a bit late, but there was a group of people, myself included, who were always pushing in that direction. We're not in the same situation. On the other hand, we're much less advanced than we could be, and we need to want this with all our might. I estimate that. When we say we mean Israel, not the world. Israel, and also the world. The world, thank you, that's what interests it. But the Americans have also woken up. What does that mean? What does it mean to advance? Why advance, Warner, and also his energy, Candy? To advance means to join in, like the Ukrainians are doing, with hundreds of thousands of UAVs, hundreds of thousands of drones. A drone from the level of a single soldier, to the battalion level, to the division level, and to the command level. We already have drones at the Air Force level, let's say. We use Hermes, Zik, and we use drones in Kochav, and other drones that are basically like airplanes. Some of them are even the size of airplanes. But today, the trend is not toward those kinds of drones. The global trend today is toward small drones. Just to clarify on screen, a small drone is defined as a drone that weighs, including fuel and bombs, up to 25 kilos. A drone that you can fit in the trunk of a car or you can launch it. You launch it in bursts from a launcher. There are now launchers for dozens of drones that you fire in bursts, and so if you attack with a swarm, it's very hard to intercept the entire swarm. There will always be some that you won't manage to intercept, and then they'll hit their targets.
Listen, the question is,
The drone's accuracy is absolute. It can go through a window. That's its big strength, accuracy.
because it's small.
Because it's small and it works with a camera. When I give a lecture about this, that's how I describe it to people. Imagine if we humans, if birds attacked us, we wouldn't be able to avoid birds. Luckily, they're afraid of us. A bird hits the exact spot.
Eli Bar-On, I thank you for coming to the studio. Thank you very much.